Hey everybody, it's Nick, and I am back reviewing, or I guess discussing and looking over things from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything with my buddy Jimmy. We are just finished up the subclasses, and we are delving right into all of the other cool things the rest of this book. There's a lot more DM-focused material in this second half of the book, so I think it'll be really interesting to go into in addition to like some spells and feats and all kinds of interesting stuff like that. How you doing, man? You still doing well?
I'm doing good. Yeah, things are nice. It's a good evening.
Awesome. So let's keep going straight into the feats here. Is there anything on this list that has jumped out to you? There was a UA posted a little while ago that had a lot of these in them. What are your thoughts about this style of feat?
I really like the feats that they've offered up that are kind of like, a very slight multi-class where you get just a little bit of the class in there, as well as the feats that focus on different tools that probably won't be used as much. And the things like the piercer and the crusher, and I know I'm naming like most of the feats that are in here. So yeah, I guess I do. I like them. I like what they're offering up. They don't seem to pack. On my first read, they don't seem to pack as much of a punch as some other feats do. I know that in fifth edition, it seems like some feats really do feel way stronger than others. Um, and a lot of these feats, I'm like, man, this is cool. Doesn't feel crazy, crazy powerful, but it is definitely cool. But I don't think they all need to be, insanely powerful.
Yeah, in some ways you run into that power creep, right? Of saying if this is going to be good enough to be used, then it has to be better than the previous options. And that may not, necessarily be the case. I think the hobby, hopefully, is able to look a little bit past the power gaming aspect. I mean, obviously, there is a really cool aspect to being super powerful. I am a power gamer to various degrees, depending on the character. But also, it can be cool to just take feat like Chef and do things. Maybe it's not as powerful as your great weapon masters and luckies of the world, but it's very cool and evocative for a character. It's interesting you said that you liked the multi-classing light kind of feats because you had an issue with stealing the specialness of other classes. Do you feel like those are distinct differences here? Like, stepping on the bard's toes with the cleric getting that sort of the power word heal and things like that. Do you think this is in the same kind of realm with people getting to have warlock invocations just by taking a feat?
No, I really don't think so because the whole point of the feat is you are taking on the powers of a class. So this is specifically something you get from another class. I don't think that somebody who is a sorcerer and takes 3 levels of bard is stealing what makes the bard special. And most of these feats, so like the fighting initiate, you get a fighting style, but that's it. You don't get a ton. The artificer initiate, you get to cast a first level spell, and you get proficiency with tools. So it's just taking a little bit of the class, but I don't think it's necessarily stealing it because you're recognizing this is something that makes this class special, and I'll take it for myself.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's some interesting options and combos in there. I think particularly the invocation one and the meta magic one are very
Hmm.
interesting to be able to graft meta magic onto another, even like full caster, something like a cleric or a wizard or a druid sounds very interesting to me. Some of those potential combos in there that sorcerers don't have access to.
I am surprised at skill expert. So that's increase in ability of score of your choice by one. You gain proficiency in one skill, and you get expertise in one skill. I know that there's a racial feat that you can take only if you're human or half elf. I believe the prodigy, and
Prodigy, yeah.
it's really close. I'm trying to remember exactly what it offers, but I know it's expertise and proficiency. I don't think it gives you an ability score point, but it surprises me that they'd make 2 feats so close together.
I have
The
I have a couple versions of prodigy floating around in my head because I think there was a UA related to like racial feats, and then there were ones that actually ended up in Xanathars, and I don't know which versions are from which thing and which one is the more recent or less recent one. But yeah, skill expert is kind of close to that.
And then the other one that really drew my attention was Shadow Touched. You get to increase your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by one, and you learn two spells, one first level spell from illusion or necromancy, and invisibility. And you can cast each of these once per day for free. So that is a feat giving you access to a second level spell that you can just cast for free once per day. That is pretty crazy.
Wow.
Imagine playing a thief or an assassin who can just for free cast invisibility on themselves once a day. That's pretty nuts.
That is really actually very cool for a rogue type individual who they have some good feats, but no like standout feats. And this seems like a really interesting option. I'm curious. There's a new list of feats here, and this is a bit off topic, but it's a question I want to ask you as another DM. When you are building NPCs or enemies or villains, do you ever use feats to build them into those characters, or do you just kind of say, listen, the bad guys have these abilities and I don't really care how they got them?
I think occasionally I might give them a feat specifically when I want the players to recognize it as a similar ability to what they have or can have. So if I had a player who abused, oh goodness, Sentinel. If I had a player abusing Sentinel, I would definitely give at some point an enemy the Sentinel feat, and there's that moment of oh gosh, he's using that too. For the most part, no, I definitely let enemies have whatever cool abilities are going to be awesome and lead to an interesting fight. As long as they're consistent within that fight, then I'm fine just writing it in. I don't think I need to justify pulling abilities out of rule books.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think most often when I'm stealing class features, it is for my 1v1 monk showdowns that in my setting monks can face off against each other and like try to take their titles and stuff like that. And I basically build them as actual PC monks, and kind of do some things to make it interesting in 1v1 combat. But I use, the actual monk features, and that makes it cool for the character. Like, oh no, stunning strike is being used against me. It's a fun moment.
Yeah, for sure. Having abilities that the players have access to and either have an identity around or really love having enemies pull those abilities out and using them against them is always really exciting.
Yeah. Cool. So there's some cool feats in here, some cool options. Let's go down to group patrons, and I'll tell you, I've just barely looked at this, and I definitely thought I knew what this was, and then I started reading this and went, oh, of course, this makes tons of sense, and I don't even remember what I thought it meant before reading this. The idea is, every adventuring group, sometimes you have a group of just ragtag people who are thrown together by happenstance working towards a common goal, but sometimes you could have people embarking on a quest or being members of the same kind of team, and so for that you would need a patron for your group. And so that's what the group patrons section is. And it's basically just giving them a strong binding element. So there's, an individual or an organization that can turn your party into a team in service of some greater purpose working together. And so that can have a huge impact on the themes and the tone and setting the pace for your whole campaign. I think this is a really interesting concept for campaigns. I've done it a few times myself. Have you ever done this kind of thing, Jimmy, in your campaigns?
I don't believe so. I know in the last, oh goodness, in the last probably 3 to 4 years, I've only run two campaigns, and they both went on pretty long. One of them is still ongoing. I think it's been 3 to 4 years since I ran for you guys.
Hmm.
I've only run two campaigns since then, and I've grown a lot as a DM within that time frame. And so I think a lot of my early campaigns really suffered from not understanding how the game was put together at all. And this has been something I've really wanted to do ever since I saw Matthew Colville's The Chain. Even before I actually watched the streams, just understanding the idea of it, I thought it was brilliant. And I loved having a way that unifies the players more so than just, well, you're all adventuring together. So I really like that a lot. But I've never pulled anything off before. I think it's something I'm thinking about for the next campaign that gets started when my current one is over.
Yeah, this was something that I have done a couple different times. The very very first campaign that I started making YouTube videos about, the players were all like colonists for this one nation, looking for a new colony somewhere in this remote archipelago. And then in the last campaign I did, they were this special forces strike team working for a conquering emperor, Alexander the Great type figure. And so I think that there's like two really interesting things you can do with this. One, you could make it so the team knows each other already. They've got a shared backstory. They've been on missions together, and maybe you start at a higher level than first level. Or you could say, hey, none of you know each other, and you're still going to have the process of learning each other's characters and meeting each other and all this, but you work for a common cause or common purpose. And so there's various examples in here, and we don't need to delve into every single example, but there's things like working for an academic academy or a guild or a military force, like I mentioned, a religious order, a royal figure, a crime syndicate, an ancient being, a deity. There's other things you can do. So I think there's really interesting aspects that can be played out using this kind of form of campaign.
I think it also might help. One of the issues I see a lot of new players have is they have this idea of D&D in their head is about being a hero, and so at level 1 they create a hero, and it can be difficult to have this idea of a character that's a complete badass and just wins and succeeds at everything, and then you throw them into the world at level 1 and the attitude that they have is just doesn't mesh with what a campaign is, where it's at act 1 in places like that. So having a defined hierarchy and you are working for these people can really help ground, I think, the setting and let players really make sure they start at level 1 so that growing into the hero that they will eventually become, the real badasses that they become at later levels, they get that whole experience.
Yeah, I like that. One of the cool things about this section is that it's really inspirational for DMs in that it kind of takes you through some of the questions. So even if you thought of your own group patron that's not listed here, it takes you through some of the questions and things to be thinking about. So like for example, the military force, it's asking, what kind of military force are you? Are you, a standing army? Is it a navy? Is it like a group of scouts like Faramir's Rangers? What are the different types of things? There's some tables you can roll on. What are the perks for being a part of this military group? What are access of information and scouts and the armory and things like that can be helpful. Who's your point of contact when you have being assigned missions and being talked to? Who is it? Like what is their personality and what are they about? And there's a bunch of different things like some quest suggestions that you could be assigned to go do. So there's lots of different, inspirational ideas on this list. Even if you go, okay, I don't want to do a military order, but I have this other cool, I want to be this, with a traveling circus. I don't know, that's a very different thing. But where would I start? You can take some of the examples listed here in Tasha's and build out from there as inspiration. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and we had discussed this before stream. I think it's inevitable that we would come to this, both of us being such big fans as we are. Those perks really tie in well to what Colville's been working on with his Kingdoms and Warfare. I'm really excited to see exactly what sort, because I know what he's doing definitely is bigger. It's not a tiny section in the middle of a book. It's a whole book devoted to this sort of thing. But the fact that Wizards released this section while Colville's working on that really shows the desire in the community, I think, and especially I hear a lot of people who've been playing for a long time talking about how it harkens back to the original editions of D&D, and building up this political structure and wanting to rule is a part of the game that has been almost lost because there aren't reasons necessarily in the current culture to have these things. That's certainly not something I'd ever seen until I heard Colville talking about it, having these, ruling bodies that you put yourselves at the top of eventually. I'm definitely excited to see the shift and see more of that in games.
Yeah, it certainly feels like the ethos and the zeitgeist of D&D has changed a lot over the years. And some things, in a cyclical way, and some things in a very different, old school used to sort of start in front of the dungeon. It was very hack and slash, and trying to figure things out was a common, not the only, but a common way to play in an old school capacity. And then you got to get all your treasure back to town, and then once you're back in town, you sort of split up and everyone do your own thing, and you come back together for the next dungeon. Whereas I think now people have more interest in doing big narrative things all together as a group. And I think that is, there's some interesting possibilities here. There's not really anything discussed in Tasha's about how could you end up at the top of um, this group. How do you start off low level in the crime syndicate and work your way up? That's not really part of this book, but I hope that this type of thing would give players inspiration for doing that. It does sort of at the end have a mention about, it's pretty small actually, it's like 4 paragraphs, about your group being its own patron, like the idea of the whole group being some kind of crime syndicate or mercenary company or arcane scholars collective or something else as a group, and what you could do in terms of running that together. They're pretty light rules. It sort of is basically saying, "Hey, you could do this," and you could refer to running a business if you would like during downtime from the DMG,
Hmm.
um, and some ideas there. But I think it's neat to just tell players, especially newer players, "Hey, you could try doing this." Because there's a lot of people who sit down for D&D, and when they were explained what it was, or they saw what it was on Stranger Things, or watched a Critical Role clip, or saw their friends playing and wanted to join, they maybe don't have a very full picture of what D&D could be. Sometimes you're explained like, hey, it's like Lord of the Rings, and we're gonna go on an adventure like the Fellowship of the Ring and go do a thing. Okay, cool. What did they do? I guess that's all we can do in this game.
Yeah.
Um, as opposed to what could a person in Middle Earth do? That's what you could do in this game. Um, those are very different experiences for people. Cool. So I think the next big chunk is spells, and we're definitely not going to go through like every single spell individually. There's been a couple of spells updated. I think Booming Blade, Green Flame Blade, and Lightning Lore, all from Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, got updated. But there are a bunch of summoning spells in here.
Yes.
And summoning spells have been, I feel like they're often a contentious thing. Like they make DMs work a lot, and the conjure fey and stuff like that. Or they're very strong, or they're very weak. Um, you are a notorious caster. Um,
Absolutely.
how do you feel like they have done on these spells so far, as you've been scanning through it?
So I've never tried to play a conjurer or conjuration wizard before, and specifically conjuring creatures in this edition. So I don't feel like I could say how I felt about summoning spells previously. These new ones all follow a set pattern, and they're very very interesting the way they've done it. Each summoning spell has a single stat block, and they're not all available to all classes. You get your summon celestial, which is available to, let's see, cleric and paladin. That seems pretty straightforward. Summon construct is available to wizard, but also the artificer, which is really interesting. But each one requires a very expensive component. The lowest level summon beast requires a 200 gold piece component, one that's not consumed, but one that definitely will require quite a bit of an investment. I think the strongest is summon celestial, and it takes a 500 gold piece uh, thing. Summon fiend is 600. So yeah, I guess it's just 100
Wow.
per level of the spell. They all feel very cookie cutter, which is kind of odd. But each one, you summon up a creature. It's an action, concentration up to an hour for it to last. And I think with only a single exception that I saw, if you lose concentration, it just disappears. You give it verbal commands. It doesn't require any actions on your own part, um, like some of the other summonings that we've seen in the subclasses where you have to use your bonus action in order to command it. These guys will just act. But what's interesting is each summoning spell gives you options. So for summon aberration, you can choose whether it is a beholderkin, a slad, or a starspawn. For summon beast, it could be air, land, or water. So each one has 2 to 3 options, or 4. The elemental has 4. And each of those options affects the stat block in different ways. So it may have more health, it may have a different type of movement speed, they have different attacks, they have different abilities. And so it really lets you kind of pick and choose exactly what sort of situation you want to have. The other thing that's really interesting about the way they did this is the stats scale with the level of the spell. So the armor class is a number plus the level of the spell. Hit points are a flat
Ooh,
amount plus a number times the level of the spell.
that's really cool.
And attacks scale with the level of the spell. Most of the attacks to hit, I think all of the attacks to hit, they actually use your spell save DC and your spell attack information for attacks and for saving throws for all these guys.
Oh,
So
interesting.
they don't have their own stats necessarily when it comes to a lot of that stuff. Their proficiency bonus is equal to your proficiency bonus. That's another way it scales. And most of these guys, or if not all of them, have multi attack, and they make a number of attacks equal to half the spell's level rounded down. So there's
Wow.
a lot of really cool things going on in each of these. And I went through each of them and we're looking at like the different abilities and the actions that they get. And it is really cool. There are a lot of options. I really love the way they've done this because it really, if I have this spell prepared, I'm really thinking, okay, do I want to cast it at, what level do I want to cast it at? Do I want to give it a few extra stats? How many attacks do I want this guy to be able to get off? Do I want to summon this form or this form? So under Summon Fey, you can choose Fuming, Mirthful, or Tricksy, and each of them gets a different bonus action. So all of them as a bonus action can teleport 30 feet. A Fuming Fey gets advantage on the next attack roll after doing that. A Mirthful Fey forces a creature it can see after teleporting. A creature that can see within 10 feet of it to make a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC. If they fail, the target is charmed for you for a minute, charmed by you and the Fae for a minute or until the target takes any damage. So that's pretty nasty. And Trixie, the Fae as a bonus action can fill a 5-foot cube within 5 feet of it with magical darkness, which lasts until the end of its next turn. So you really get very different abilities. And now the Fae just have different. I think that bonus action is the only difference between the three of them, but some of them have different movement speeds. For a fiendish spirit, demons have a speed of 50. Devils have, oh no, sorry, I'm looking at hit points. They all have a movement speed of 40. Demons get a climbing speed of 40, and devils get a flying speed of 60, depending on what you're summoning. So really cool. I really, really like the way they
Wow.
did these spells.
I honestly, I think this is the solution. Like, this is my first reaction. I think this is the solution to summoning. This does not scare me as a DM. This does not annoy me as a DM. I don't have to go and find all these stats. It also doesn't
Yeah,
feel abusable in the same
yeah.
way that the other conjurers did, where you
Mm-hmm.
could, if you let a player pick what they summoned. I mean, obviously there's the pixie polymorph thing.
Yeah.
From Conjure Fey, that's a big problem. But there's also the thing of, okay, can you use what books can you use? Is it only the monster manual? Can you use Volos? Can you use Mordenkainen's? Can you use third-party books like Strongholds and Followers, the Tome of Beasts, or Critter Compendium, or stuff like that? Can you use third-party books that may or may not be balanced as well as WotC books, or even some unbalanced WotC things. Like there's a lot of room for cheese when you say, hey, just any old creature. But when you
Yeah.
say, here's the spell and here's the stat block, this is what you get, combined with all the different options in there, that it makes it's not just you summon, beast and it's the exact same beast over and over and over again. No, it's a different creature based on what you're summoning. That is very cool to me. I think that it gives players some choice, some flexibility. Do I want to use this? Do I want to use that? You could take one or two of these and have tons of options for what you wanted
Mm-hmm.
to summon and how you
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do that without you being able to really abuse and cheese it. Unless, of course, there's cheese within these stat blocks, but I'm not seeing any so far that seems that bad. So I think this is the answer for summoning. I would be very excited for a player to take these in one of my campaigns, which I have never been able to say about a conjure spell before.
I definitely, looking at each of these, every single spell gets me excited. I want it. I want to be able to cast it and make these decisions. In the long run, I would worry that you just simply don't have as many options when I can summon, you know, beasts. There's a huge variety. I can summon giant eagles if I need them to carry us. I can summon, a wolf if I need it to go like scout or something. And with these, there are much fewer options, and so I would worry that if I had this spell for a long time, it wouldn't carry quite as much weight as these spells that allow me to pick everything. But that is such a small thing compared to, yeah, as a DM, I don't want to have to be on my toe. You conjure a celestial, and I got to go figure out, okay, what are the celestials? What's an appropriate level? Like what shows up? Or giving that power to the player, and they just get to pick whatever they want, and they'll just pick what exactly works, and yeah, that cheese happens. So I think this is brilliant as well. I
There's
think this is an excellent solution.
there's also the reality that the creature resembles, at least in Beast I'm looking here, yeah, the creature resembles, a form of your choice, native to its environment. So if you wanted like specifically a giant owl
Mm-hmm.
for like maybe for like perception checks or something, I think a lenient DM would recognize the nuance in maybe what you're asking for, especially if it was from a good place, and be able to say, yeah, based on the specific creature that you're going for, here's a
Mm-hmm.
little. It's not even really an extra something, but just like is going with the intent of the spell. I think that could be overcome in a lot of these cases, but it would be interesting to see, a really long form game, how often these are being used in various kind of ways.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the only other spell in here that really drew my eye, and I was curious to hear your thoughts on it, was Dream of the Blue Veil.
It
It's
sounds weird.
yeah, it is. It's out there. It's a seventh level conjuration spell.
So hardly
Casting
anybody's gonna
time.
cast it. That's
Casting time
real.
is 10 minutes. Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing. Range is 20 feet. And what it does, I'll read the first paragraph. You and up to 8 willing creatures within range fall unconscious for the spell's duration and experience visions of another world on the material plane, such as Orith, Toril, Kryn, or Eberron. If the spell reaches its full duration, the vision concludes with each of you encountering and pulling back a mysterious blue curtain. The spell then ends with you mentally and physically transported to the world that was in the vision.
Ugh,
I
I
have
don't
no
like
idea.
this. I hate it so much.
So weird. It's plane shift, except
No,
it's
it's not.
moving
It's
in.
fourth
Well, no.
wall shift. A duration is
No.
6 hours, so you last there for 6 hours. Yeah.
What? No. It's permanent. You move there. It's
Well, why
if
does it
you
say duration 6 hours?
because you have to dream it for 6 hours before you actually move there.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
Now, to the second paragraph will alleviate some of your concerns. To cast the spell, you must have a magic item that originated on the world you wish to reach. So the access of this is still completely in the hands of the DM.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
Yeah. So you can't just go somewhere. But
Okay.
it's such a weird. I don't understand why. It's kind of cool. I like the idea, and there's that idea that all of our games are in the same universe because they're all just different versions of the prime material plane. I've heard that before, and this is kind of a spell that allows you to practice that. But why?
Yeah, it seems like a nod to that. That might be something that newer or, players, not DMs, might be more aware or conscientious of that, or not aware of that all of the games sort of take place in a shared universe. I like that they make sure that you listen, you can only cast the spell if your DM wants you to cast this spell by
Yeah,
saying here is a magic item from Eberron. Not
yeah,
one I the DM picked that so happens to be in the Eberron sourcebook, but one I
yeah.
am telling you came from Eberron or whatever. Um the reason I loathe this as a concept is because one, I don't actually really like or recognize that my campaigns take place in the same, multiverse as other D&D settings. And two, I don't care for any of the formal published campaign settings, at least as far as I have read. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. I just have looked at them and gone, not my thing. I want to make my own. And so I have. Um, but I would not want someone to come into my game and be like, yo, I know a lot about the Forgotten Realms or Eberron. I am going, or Taldore. I am going to take us to that place, and we're going to spend time adventuring in that place. No, no, you're not. I don't like that. I don't like my campaign being forced to go to some other
Well, it's not
setting.
forced. It's not forced.
That's because of
You
the second
decide.
paragraph.
Yes, and that means that that's the reality of it, right? So this isn't ever going to be a threat of, I'm going to take this campaign and I'm going to steer it to this other world. I think now that as you're talking about this, I'm like, oh, cool. This is a way where the DM can say, hey, let's go visit Vox Machina. Let's just go there and there's a
If
mission
they
and they need our
wanted
help
to,
with
yeah.
something. Yeah, yeah.
But so
That
so
is such a
why
cool opportunity.
but why isn't that accomplished through like a portal that they can step through? Like if it's DM driven, like as a DM, if I see a
Oh,
player
that's
take
fair.
this,
That's fair.
if I see
Hmm.
a player take this spell, I chuckle and go, "Yeah, you just wasted a spell. Why don't I tell you like you're never going to use this spell because it relies on me?" So
That's fair.
so why
Yeah.
wouldn't you just create a portal to I'm fine doing that. I enjoy watching some Critical Role. I could BS my way through some of Taldore. I could for a short period of time put a portal, they go to Taldore as a result and they talk to some cool NPCs that they might recognize from the show just as a reference, maybe a more fun house kind of session and then they go back. I don't like putting this in front of the player and then saying, "Hey, by the way, your DM has to like how would you process this if you saw one of your players pick
Yeah.
this spell, what would you
Hmm.
do? Because I
Hmm.
know you often will design challenges specifically so that your players get to use their cool things. If you saw someone take this spell, would you feel obligated to give them a time to use it?
I wouldn't use the word obligated. I would be excited to give them a time to use it. I would try to say, okay, what's a universe that this player really cares about? What's a short little thing that they can do there and give them a need to go there? And then the player feels awesome. And all I did was, have like a session or two where I had to read up about like a city in another world or whatever. I would definitely jump at the opportunity if somebody was excited to use it. But I mean, I'm not saying that that's the right way to be or the wrong way to be.
Oh no,
It's
obviously
just,
me neither.
yeah.
Okay, so there is something else that I am considering as a part of this.
Okay.
Um, you experience visions of another world on the material plane, such as, and they give examples that of the ones I recognize are D&D exclusive.
Hmm.
What if there were other ones in there that were not D&D exclusive? That obviously they can't list in this book for like copyright and stuff. But what
Hmm.
if you could go to like, and this is actually making me more excited about it, like Middle Earth.
Hmm.
Like what if you
Sure.
could go to Tatooine? Like what like it doesn't say D&D properties, none of which excite me, but there are lots of properties in the world that excite me. That's kind of interesting. Now all of a sudden, like going to Middle Earth or like going to Hogwarts in your D&D game. Um, that's kind of neat. Again, it is the. I feel like this is best served with a spell scroll
Yes. Oh, for sure. I totally agree.
because if you, the DM, have to give them the item necessary to get their, they need the Light of Elendil. Well, don't make them take the spell and use the spell slot and all these things. Just send your players, like even if they're third level or whatever, send them to Middle Earth. Actually, third level
Yeah.
players in Middle Earth would be quite competent. Uh, but seeing as Gandalf is only ever a fifth level magic user, um, I think that'd be really cool.
I do have to say, Legolas has multi attack because he can definitely shoot more than one arrow at a time. And they do kill orcs very quickly. They one shot orcs, so low magic for sure, but maybe not necessarily as low level as the books would have you believe. I think the movies definitely they're higher level
Oh, for
characters.
sure, yeah, because super cinematics.
Yeah.
Um, there is something in here on, is it personalizing spells?
Yeah, and nothing.
Very
I
lame.
didn't read through the whole thing. It didn't blow me away. It was just feel free to make your magic missile look like a flock of chickens.
Yeah, which by the way is the best way to utilize magic missile. Um, but I think this is more things saying, "Hey, new players, you have permission to do
Yeah.
this." By the way,
Hmm.
as an experienced player, I go, "Yeah, obviously, people should be describing and flavoring their spells in a way that is unique and personal to their character. Aren't we all doing that?" But obviously, that is not true for everyone. And like, ooh, what if you're a pyromancer using lightning bolt and it's this like burst of red lightning? Ooh, like yeah, go for it, man. Sure, that sounds awesome. It doesn't give you any ways to mechanically personalize your spells, which I thought slash hoped it would. Um, but flavor text is awesome. A farmer sorcerer hurls magic missiles that look like chickens. This is it. This is the best art in the book. Magic chicken missiles is the way to go, ladies and gentlemen. I think that's a new character idea here.
The
Um,
farmer sorcerer.
the farmer sorcerer who has magic missiles that look like chickens. Next, we've got magic items coming up. What are your thoughts on? This is a very big, broad question, but what are your thoughts on D&D 5e's magic items as a whole?
As a whole.
Yeah.
Well, I would say I usually don't look at anything below rare. It feels like, and I would say I usually use them as a jumping off point. I love designing magic items. It's one of my favorite
Same.
things to do. And so I like looking at magic items because it gives me an idea of different cool abilities that could be in there. But I don't really feel constrained to books. I don't own a DMG. I very rarely open it to look through magic items because I've got an idea of all the ideas that are in that book because I've read through it once or twice, and so I don't really feel need. I don't feel like I need to go and look up magic items. I like items that are kind of classic, and I know a lot of those are artifacts, but the Staff of Thunder and Lightning, even I honestly have no idea how old that item is, how long it's been in D&D. I know it was in 3.5, but it feels iconic. So I love that item, and I will put that item into my game. But for the most part, I'm designing them on my own. So I look through these, excited to see new stuff, but not to, oh, I'm going to use this exact item in my campaign.
Yeah, I definitely have an appreciation for the famous legendary items. I want my players, I want new players to get the experience of hearing about and interacting with the deck of many things and the hand and
Absolutely.
eye of Vecna and some of these incredibly famous artifacts and items. In general, I agree with you. I think the items are usually pretty weak sauce, and I use them as a jumping off point. I often go back to older editions. With my experience, I have the sort of the luxury of being able to do that, sort of bust out my fourth edition or 3.5 books and say, hey, what are some cool ideas, and then just update the mechanics. I just wanted to, get some ideas for what this might be. The updating the mechanics to make it fit into 5e is super easy. So almost all of my magic items are bespoke. I've designed them specifically for this player for this campaign, and that's how I can get away with designing something that, if you published it in a book, would be busted as all get out because it could be abused by this class or that kind
Yeah,
of group of
absolutely.
characters. But I'm not giving it to this class or that class. I'm giving it to this
Hmm.
one character in this one campaign. So I think 5e. I don't know. I think I have different ideas about magic items than 5th edition does, obviously. So I have sort of redesigned how I interact with and give out and how often I give out magic items to players. I want them to get fewer items that are all really cool and character defining and make them feel awesome when they get them. But like to me, a +1 sword is like a waste of a magic item because it's so boring. Um, you get just hey +1 to attack and damage. Oh man. As opposed to like, oh, once a day the sword can cast a fireball. Like you can do a new cool thing.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. Um,
I don't mind having like I will usually throw in plus weaponry. Even well, I guess I don't really have almost any that I give out that are just plus. A lot of times when I'm thinking of adding that in, it's oh everybody's kind of topped off, everybody's got cool things, and it would be nice if we had an extra dagger or short sword or something that could deal magic damage, as well as it's a cool moment when you open, the sarcophagus and everything's rusted and destroyed except for this, little dagger, and it's just a +1. I can make a cool moment of finding the cool thing without worrying about overloading the characters with huge numbers of magic items.
Definitely, especially if you know that they have some, young ward or their sidekicks or their followers or the army that they're raising, and they're like, hey, by the way, this is chump change to us, but a +1 longsword
Oh,
to
are
a
you kidding
soldier
me?
is awesome.
Giving a magic item to an NPC? I will rue the day. How could you?
You can also obviously always sell them. So there's lots of things players can do with items that they don't want or have any use for to make them not feel useless. But yeah, I like powerful rare items. And so yeah, I generally don't look at anything below very rare if I'm going to give them something. And usually I think most items I give my players, even starting at like third, fourth, fifth level, would be in the legendary category.
I
If
think
I were to
early
balance
on,
them.
I like to give out. I remember in my last campaign, I gave out. I think it was some smaller weapon. It just dealt 1d6 extra fire damage, and it was probably a +1 weapon. I like giving out a couple of those when it's like the first magic item, and it's just something little. And then once they have really got an appetite for them, and everybody wants something, you give them a stash of something big, and everybody gets something nice. So I don't mind having a lot of little things. I also know we're both big fans of consumables. I think
Love
consumable magic
consumables.
items are the answer. Just because it forces the players to think, oh man, is this the moment? Is this when I'm going to use this thing? I really think I should keep saving it, but if I keep saying that, and on top of that, you could give them really powerful stuff and not worry about loading them down and having way too many magic items because once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah. I think you should always give your third level party a ring of 3 wishes with 1 wish in it. Because they will go the entire campaign not using it, but every 3 sessions they're going to have the conversation of like, oh, should we? Is this the time? And I love that. I absolutely love that. And then they're still going to go the whole campaign not use it. If
Yeah.
a boss fight is ever too hard, they have a get out of jail free card. So throw crazy
Mm-hmm.
stuff at them.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I gave my were they third level, fourth level at the time. I gave them a scroll of teleport, and until they used it, I felt completely free to throw any and all challenges at them, including I think a full-on vampire in its lair when they were like sixth level. Um, because I mean, they walked into its lair. I didn't put it in front of them. They were like,
Sure.
"Hey, I think there's some kind of evil undead thing in that spooky castle. Let's knock on its door. Surely it won't be a vampire. Nick wouldn't do that to us. It was a vampire." But they had a scroll of teleport, and they said they fought for a little bit and said it's time to nope, and they noped, and so they used their scroll of teleport. Fantastic. That's what it's there for. But they felt like they had earned it because they had found that scroll of teleport and it was theirs and all these things. And it never felt like Nick is being a jerk because he's overwhelming us with terrible things. So I think magic items can be used to great effect, especially consumables in that way. I do like the new category of magic items that they're leveraging. I think this is the first time in a 5e book we have seen magic tattoos. Is that correct? Other than dragon marks?
I can't think of any other examples, but to be completely honest, I don't read much outside of just the core books. I haven't read most of the others.
Okay. I don't do a ton of that either, outside of inspiration or specific things. Yeah, so I like magic tattoos. It's just another cool way to do it. Um, were there any of these that jumped out at you as awesome or anything to talk
The
about
tattoos are
individually?
just all of
No,
the
no, no,
magic
all the magic
items.
items. Just something to jump out at you that was kind of neat.
One of the ones that I haven't decided how I feel about, there are a magic item associated, at least one associated with every single spellcasting class. And it arrives in three varieties. There's an uncommon, a rare, and a very rare. It requires attunement by that specific spellcasting class, and it is the individual parts don't matter much, but each one gets either a +1, a +2, or a +3 in scaling with its rarity to a caster's spell attack and spell save DC. And then each one also gives a special ability. So, for example, the all purpose tool is the artificer's version of this +1, +2, or +3 to the associated stats. And as an action, you can focus the tool to channel your creative forces, choose a cantrip that you don't know from any class list. For 8 hours, you can cast that cantrip, and it counts as an artificer cantrip for you. Once this property is used, it can't be used again until the next dawn. So there's a lot of these, and there's, oh my goodness, there's probably at least 10 of them for Wizard, because there's a couple other types of them for Wizard as well. And the ability that you get is usually okay. It's an okay ability. There's nothing wrong with that. But the idea of giving a permanent +1, 2, or even 3 to spell attacks or spell save DCs really surprises me with the amount of bounded accuracy that's in 5th edition. A +3 to spell save DC is pretty nuts. Like that is some crazy numbers. I don't know if I would ever give anything like that. I'm nervous to give my players a +1 to their spell saving throw. I've thought about that because it feels good as a caster. And my thought was, okay, you could pick a certain number of spells per day, like one spell a day, you get a +1 or a +2 or whatever. The permanent is pretty nuts, I think.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I generally avoid those static bonuses in AC or to hit modifiers is the same reason. The flat math, bounded accuracy of 5th edition makes it really dangerous when you start to give players extra numbers. And yeah, I think it is something I have gotten something like this as a player before, something that increased my spell save DC. There are not many items that do it. Um,
Now there are.
well, yeah, now there are. I think that is interesting. Again, this item, like, you don't have to give players these magic items, and unless your world works differently than mine, players cannot, um, of their own free will, just choose to have a certain magic item. The DM still has to put it in front of them at some point or another, whether it's through a store or through a quest, or the player saying, "Hey, I really want this thing," and I go on a quest to go find it. I think that's cool, but yeah, I still think it's DM buy-in has to be there, but it's
The thing
strong.
that concerns me with items like this is players love to look at magic items. I think that the thing that I've seen players do more often than look at magic items is create characters, and that's it. Like it's the number two thing for excited players to do is to go through and look at a bunch of magic items.
Which, small
And
mini rant here, which is why it's very,
mhm.
very dumb that they put magic items in the DMG instead of the PHB. Fourth edition, that was one of the things it got right. It said, yo, players, want some magic items? Here are magic items in the book that the players are supposed to read so that you can have things that you want and to go questing after. Four, you got
Well,
it right.
also
Five, it
fourth edition
reverted.
lets you melt down any item
Well,
you
I didn't
got
say
and
it
turn
got
it
it
into
all
any other
right,
item.
Jimmy.
I'm just saying that players need to see magic items because they could pick any magic item they wanted.
That's true.
They could go out and pick them, and in other editions,
Touche.
you have to
But
quest
yes,
for them,
players do
especially fifth
fantasize
edition.
over magic items quite a bit.
And now, any player I have that reads through this book, if they're a caster, they're going to be like, "Oh yeah, I want one of these, a +2 at least." And I'm going to have that conversation. I'm going to have that conversation of this is actually stupid busted, and maybe you get something like this. Maybe it's at the end of the game. Like this is crazy stuff. I do really really like though. If I'm going to steal the microphone for a little bit longer, there is a set of wizard items that instead of giving the +1, +2, +3, they have a set list of spells that are stored in them. And while you're attuned to it, these count as wizard spells for you. And I don't believe it prepares them for you. So you still have to pick them and prepare them. But you basically add these spells to a list of spells that you know. And it's got a set number of charges, and you can spend a minute to use up one charge, and you can swap spells that you've prepared. So you can spend a minute, spend one charge, and you can give up one prepared spell and gain a different prepared spell. It has to be of the associated school with the item. And then they also have like a cool ability that goes with it. But I thought that was so cool, probably unnecessary because wizards are already really strong. But so cool that it gives you this option of it doesn't matter if I don't prepare all my divination spells. If I've got this item and I really need a divination spell, I can pop it in, and I just have that option. I really like that a lot.
That is pretty neat. What you were saying got me thinking. And this has undergone about 7 seconds of revision, and that's it. What do you think about the idea? Maybe it's a feat, maybe it's a player ability that they get later on, or something. What do you think about a player getting to, when they cast a spell, they can burn another spell slot and increase their spell save DC by that number? Um,
There is meta magic in 3.5 that basically does that. It acts as if the spell is of a higher level. And I think that is a very interesting idea.
So the reason I say high, like you get it at a later level, is like, man, if you're a 14th level wizard, how many of your first level spells are you really using every day? But man, if you really want somebody to fail that, disintegrate. Let me cast this, burn a second level spell alongside it to increase my DC by 2. And maybe you can only do it a certain number of times per day or something. But that sounds like you have to pay the price for an increased spell save DC. Because I think you're right, a permanent passive all the time is a big increase.
That's really interesting. So you would cast the spell and then burn an additional spell slot. So
Yep.
you're not casting the spell at a higher level.
Nope. You cast your 6th level disintegrate, and then burn a second level spell alongside that to increase the spell save DC by 2. And maybe you cap it at you can only use first or second level spells for it. And anything beyond that, it's just a +2 to the DC. So they're not like, I'm going to burn a 6th level and then also my 5th level because I really want them to fail this. That's a huge increase. But so maybe you cap it in certain ways. And again, this has undergone no revision.
Sure,
If
sure.
anybody's actually listening to this idea, it's very like maybe don't do this. But it's an interesting way to give a cost to player opting into. Yeah, I really want this spell to work.
I would love the idea. I'm really captivated by the idea of I can burn a first or second level spell slot to do a thing. I think that's brilliant for higher level
Why, thank you.
casters. That, on the other hand, that the whole idea I think would work because it basically means you do have a permanent increase to your spell save DC of your highest level spells because
Yeah.
you'd always activate it when you cast your highest level spell.
But those
There's
are the
no
ones you
reason
really
not
want
to.
to work, right?
True, but then just give them this item, and it's almost the exact same thing. With maybe their if you have access to 6th level spells, maybe their 4th level also gets the benefit. But
Well, yeah, I mean this it has a cost to it. But yeah,
I
I mean
love
that's a fair
that though.
point.
I might make a magic item that is fueled by you burn extra spell slots to
Do it.
give higher level players a usage for those 1st and 2nd level spell slots. I think one of the biggest failings of 5th edition in terms of spell casting is the way that spells become useless at later levels. I really don't know if that should be true. So, for example, at 3.5, you've got your 1st level spell, Magic Missile. That's scaled with your level, so you always feel good casting it. Even when you're really powerful, that's a ton of Magic Missiles you're producing. But here at 5th edition, Magic Missile, once you reach a certain point, just doesn't feel good anymore. You might as well use Firebolt, because cantrips, I don't like damage scaling cantrips. I think it's ridiculous. It's probably necessary for balance, but I don't like them. It just makes
That's
your
fair.
lower level spells feel useless, and they don't scale hard enough. When you only get 1d6 per spell level of extra damage, like that's useless. There's no reason to cast that anymore. I've never been a fan of how that works as you level up.
That's a fair point. However, I think we're going backwards in the book towards spells, and we should carry on forward towards some DM tools. You like that transition? That was a pretty nice
Very
transition.
nice.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
did want to
Oh,
one
never
last
mind.
item I
That's a
wanted to
terrible
call attention
transition
to.
then.
Yeah, no, that's on me. One last time I wanted to call attention to. There are some really interesting artifacts in here that I like, but the Teeth of Dalver Nar.
I saw that.
There are some really fun things in there. I'm extremely tempted to give this almost completely unedited to my players.
So I'm a sucker for anything with a chart, and this is a big old. I haven't read in detail the whole thing because it's a big old honkin' magic item, but it's you roll on a chart and crazy thing happens, and I am a sucker for that. I love charts. I love roll on this chart to see what thing happens and roll with it. I think it creates very emergent gameplay. A big fan.
Some of the abilities that this gives out, some of them are amazing, some of them are not great, and I really like that chaos to it. But I think some great examples, if you roll a 2 and you pull out to the Douglas Surprising Day, the Human Molar. So the way this ability works, for those of you without a book right in front of you, is there's 20 teeth. You pull a tooth out of a bag, and you can either plant it in the ground or plant it in your mouth. If you plant it in the ground, it summons a creature that is friendly to you, and they're around for 10 minutes, and then they disappear, unless otherwise noted. If you put it in your mouth, crazy effects happen, but you can't undo that. It's in your mouth. It's stuck there. Ooh. Yeah. So some examples of some of the things the teeth do. The first 2 are really interesting. If you plant the first tooth in the ground, you summon 9 cats. If you plant it in your mouth, you get 8 charges to cast the spell Revivify that automatically casts on you if you're dead. So it literally gives you 9 lives, which is just brilliant.
Oh yeah, no, they're absolutely crazy. It's like a deck of many things, but it seems like everything's good.
So there are some interesting ones in there. One that I saw. When you finish a long rest, the tooth casts Sanctuary on you, and the spell lasts for 24 hours until you break it. Just a permanent Sanctuary at the start of your day. And then some of the more nuts one on the other end of the spell. You can use the tooth. This is implanted in your mouth. You can use the tooth to cast Counterspell at 9th level.
Oh.
Once you use this property, it can't be used again until the next dawn. Whenever you finish a long rest, if you haven't used the tooth to counter a spell since your last long rest, your hit point maximum is reduced by 2d10.
This is solved. This is solved, I think, by having if you have one caster in your party, they cast a cantrip at bedtime, and you counterspell it. Otherwise, like a 2-week journey would just kill you.
I think I would rewrite this. I would want a harmful spell must be cast. And remember, you can get rid of HP reduction. Is it greater restoration or lesser?
It's greater restoration,
Okay.
which costs 1,000 gold to cast, I think.
So I
This
would
is
be.
brutal.
Oh, it's an interesting. Oh man, some of these are interesting. I love this one. You're gonna like because this is exhaustion. This is the Ruby Veined Red Dragon Fang. If you plant
What?
it summons an ancient red dragon,
Always a good
which
option.
is friendly to you for 10 minutes. So you can
Outstanding.
get an ancient red dragon for 10 minutes. If you put it in your mouth, you gain immunity to fire damage. As an action, you can exhale fire in a 90-foot cone. Each creature in that area must make a DC 24 dexterity saving throw, taking 26 d6 fire damage on a failed save. Half as much on a successful. After using the breath weapon, you gain 2 levels of exhaustion.
So, I think, ladies and gentlemen, when we were mentioning the value of giving powerful consumable items to your players at very low levels, that was before we knew this existed.
It's so great. Well, these aren't necessarily consumable. The planting
They're
is
not?
consumable. If you put them in your mouth, it's permanent. You just have it.
Yeah, but you've consumed that one thing. You can't keep drawing number 19 over and over again, can you?
No,
To get ancient
but
red
you will.
dragons.
You can't. So if you plant it, it's consumable. It's gone forever. If you put it in your mouth, you can cast your fire breath anytime you want, as many times as you want, whatever you want to do,
But this is
until the exhaustion kills
basically,
you.
yeah, but this is basically like, this is not one magic item. This is 20 magic items, and all of which seem incredibly powerful. So this is
Yes, this is an
great.
artifact. This is an artifact. All artifacts are generally going to be game breaking, as
I
they should
kind
be, I
of
think.
I kind of feel inspired, and this is how I usually use magic items, right? I kind of feel inspired to like give one of these teeth
Yes.
to a
Hmm.
player. Like I'm gonna
Hmm.
pick a tooth and say that, like the counterspell thing. Like this is awesome. Here is a tooth, and you can put it in your mouth to summon something, or put it on the ground to summon something, or put it in your mouth to get this cool effect. Um, that seems cool.
What really excites me, I would love to give this bag, the whole artifact, to my party. They just get it, not knowing what it is. And I would want one of the points of this is if you don't purposefully sow the tooth in the ground or put it in your mouth, then after a certain amount of time, it summons the things, but they're not friendly. They're there to kill you.
Oh.
And I would love to give this to a player. And I would want the teeth to have more negative effects. I want them to be a positive and a negative. I think that's the most interesting thing because you can't remove the tooth, right? And I would love it if they pull a tooth out. They're like, "What's in this bag?" They pull something out of the bag. It's like a tooth. Oh, and they like do whatever with the tooth, and suddenly there's, I don't know, 2 incubi, something, a tough fight, right? And so they're like, "Oh, I pulled something out of this bag, and now there's monsters here to kill me." Great. And so they leave the bag alone for a little bit, and then feed them a little bit of information about no, you got to plant the tooth in the ground, or you got to plant it in your mouth. And having a player roll on this chart to put something in their mouth, and I don't need to tell them what's on the chart. I'll just pick. Right? They roll an
Mhm.
18, and I'm going to pick the most interesting thing, where it's not game breaking, not crazy, but it's got a really good positive effect and a really bad negative effect, and they just have that now, and have that not be too terrible, not feel too bad, and then the rest of the campaign have them terrified to use the bag. I think that can be just this wonderful version of the deck of many things, where it's like every time we plant a tooth, it's gone forever. Right, but we do get to summon a thing. Maybe it's useful, maybe it helps, and that's a cool moment. Or do we risk putting it in our mouth and getting something crazy powerful, but also having to deal with? I love this item. This one really makes the gears spin.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what you want in magic items as a
Hmm.
DM as
Hmm.
opposed to as a player. You want items that make you think, oh, there's cool quests you could have. There's an NPC that you could engage with as a part of this magic item, where it's going to create interesting choices for the players. I really like that.
Absolutely.
Um, Jimmy, do you remember my phenomenal segue earlier?
I do,
Gonna
Nick. I
A
do.
better editor would take it and put it right here, even though it doesn't really make sense with the spells thing. I would take it and put it right here. I'm not going to. Instead, I'm gonna jump it forward into Dungeon Master tools. Oh, look at that, two for
Fantastic.
two.
Huzzah.
Um, yeah, there's a lot of interesting DM tools here. right off the bat, they jump into the most detailed and descriptive session zero text I have ever seen in a D&D book. I was trying to remember if I'd ever seen a session zero mentioned as more than a paragraph at most in a D&D book,
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
don't think I ever have. This is a couple pages on
Hmm.
limits, the idea behind character creation, party creation, forming the party. It mentions it's a callback to group patrons. Well done, like callbacks. Running the game for just one player. There's some stuff. There's a blurb about that. The social contract that you're entering into with other players. Limits, hard and soft limits. Things to avoid with different people and groups. House rules, which I love. I do lots of house ruling, so it's a special call out to the home brewers among us. I think that it's really cool that they mention the value and importance of a session zero, which I think there are better explanations and descriptions of on YouTube in lots of different capacities. But yeah, I like that they're making a specific call out to it in an official 5e WotC book.
Yeah, it's really nice to have for sure.
And then we have sidekicks. Here we have sidekicks. I think that so obviously we have mentioned Colville multiple times. Full disclosure to the audience, Jimmy and I are both big time Matt Colville fangirls. Um,
Absolutely.
and he has rules for followers in Strongholds and Followers that I'm a big fan of. But D&D takes its own shot at the idea of adventuring NPCs that are creatures there to help you out a bit. Without sort of taking over, but oftentimes you meet people in your adventures that maybe for a period, for a season, for an adventure, want to travel alongside you. And this is rules for creating those characters that are a little more complex than just a static stat block, and a little less complex than a full-on character sheet.
Yeah, having the access to sidekicks is really great because it can really feel great as a player to have this guy, right? Have this character that I can craft to make my character look cooler. I think that's a wonderful thing to have. It also gives you the opportunity of rounding out the weakness of a party, especially when parties are small. When you only have 3 players, or if you don't have a cleric, having access to a system which allows you to bring in somebody with a little bit of healing magic, or bring in somebody who's got that little the expertise and a skill that you really need. Having a sidekick who's just like a smith who follows you around and keeps weapons up to repair. Stuff like that is just so cool. It can
Yeah.
have so much flavor in it, and I'm very glad that there's rules for players being able to build these themselves.
And that is a big part of the special mention for playing D&D for just with just one PC. Um, it makes a special call out to the value of sidekicks, which can help out a lot in other skills and in combat. There are 3 basically classes that your sidekick gets to have. It's either an expert, a spellcaster, or a warrior. And they basically do exactly what you would think they would. There's the skill monkey, there's the spellcaster, and there's the fighter. And they get class features just like other classes do, and they gain hit points and ability score increases and stuff like that pretty much whenever you do. They're your sidekick, but they are designed to be less exciting and interesting and powerful in combat than a normal PC. For example, the spellcaster basically functions as a half caster. If I'm looking at this table right, they never get more than 5th level spells. um, they're all of the things that these other classes can do are not as cool as a normal like fighter or
Yeah, they're definitely a weaker version of player classes. Would never be recommended for a player to use one of these if they want to be of equal skill and strength as the other players in the campaign.
Definitely. Colville has a different approach where you get it is more of a stat block based approach. It's a little simpler to have those characters, and based on what their level is, they have certain abilities that they can use usually like 1 or 3 times a day that can help out in certain ways. They're less flashy. They're a little less complicated, and I think a little more interesting than these sidekicks. It's hard to tell without having really used both of them. Um, but I think it'd be neat to maybe run a game with these side by side, and one person is using a follower, and one person is using a sidekick, and see how they feel, or maybe run a game for just one person. You should run a game for me. I'm deciding right now, and I will have a follower and a sidekick. I have decided. And I can tell
That sounds
which
like a
one
lot of
feels
fun.
better. um, but yeah, there's some interesting rules. I think it's something that D&D has needed. That outside of we've had third-party solutions, but other than that, we haven't had a first-party solution. So it's interesting that they're coming up with them here. Do you have any thoughts beyond that on these sidekicks, Jimmy?
No, it's not something I've ever employed in a campaign that I've had. I've in most campaigns I've had. I think the least number of players I've had is four. I would tend to run way higher than that up until my current campaign, which has three. And I've never felt like I needed to have another character in the campaign, with the exception of we mentioned this during our last talk, but I really like to have certain abilities be exclusive to classes. So Rangers are the only class that I allow people to track with, to truly track. Maybe they can find a track, but the understanding of how to follow tracks through the woods, you need to be a ranger or have sufficient backstory in order to justify it. Rogues are the only class, again, unless you really specialize, rogues are the only class who are able to find really hidden traps. I really want
Mm-hmm.
that class to be cool in that area. And so I've often wanted the players to be aware that if they need one of these skills, go find somebody who can do that. And in the past, I've always intended to create just a full character sheet for these people. And I think I would probably use this sidekick system instead. I like how it allows me to basically make them the same level as the players, and they are sufficiently weaker than them, but are kind of scaled up to the right spot. I really like the way they did this. So I can imagine using this, but I haven't. I have not done that. So I don't have a lot to add for how it feels to use it, because I really have no idea.
Yeah, numerically it definitely feels better than followers. I've played in several like two-person D&D games, like two players, and one DM, and we've
Mm-hmm.
often used followers. And overwhelmingly, the followers, when they can do their cool thing, it feels neat. They feel like they're helping, but not super helpful. The problem is that their numbers are very low, so they
Mm-hmm.
often can't do their cool thing, and they end up being very lame. So I think it'd be neat to have these definitely have like higher numbers because their numbers basically scale with yours. They have the
Yeah.
same kind of calculations. They have ability scores and they have proficiency the same as you do, as opposed to being more static numbers. So these would definitely feel better and when we say weaker, we mean they just have less class features. They don't get a subclass or anything from a subclass, and their full-on class is a little bit weaker than a PC class might be. There's a few dead levels, something that D&D 5 does not have for player characters. And there's just a couple of abilities for the whole class with no subclass whatsoever. So I think this is good. Next we
I
oh,
don't. No, sorry. Go ahead.
oh I was just gonna say
I'm
next
looking
we've
at.
got parlaying with monsters here, but if you had something you want to say about sidekicks,
Nope. Nope. I'm ready to move on.
awesome. Um, Sorry, I'm trying to fight back some yawns here because this is a big old book. Um,
It is.
Parlaying with monsters. So this is again super interesting. I feel like I'm going to say this a bunch of times reading through this book, but this is my reaction. Super
Yeah.
interesting things that an experienced person was like, yeah, definitely, you can definitely do this. But a new player is going, oh, I guess you could do that, and they're going to provide some light rules, but not dense rules. Is my prediction. I haven't read any of this, but that is my prediction based on all the things so far. Um, so they're discussing like obviously if you meet a monster in the woods, you don't always have to kill it. These are creatures just like you're a creature. They have lives and goals and loved ones sometimes that they want to, they have desires and wants and things that they care about. Outside of the animated skeleton who is just sitting in the dungeon waiting for someone to kill him, like if you run across an owl bear, that owl bear has little owl bear babies and wants to go eat and all kinds of things. And so there's tables for monster desires based on things like that creature might want. You could do research based on what the type of creature it is. So let's use an owlbear because there's art for it here. Let's use an owlbear, which is a monstrosity, and so you could use nature or survival to try to figure out. I'd probably enforce nature to try to figure out what does this creature want. They do set a DC. The DC is 10 plus the creature's challenge rating. So owlbears are CR3, I'm pretty sure. So you'd have a nature check, need to beat a DC 13. And then let's go down to monstrosity here. All the things have their own table. And you could roll or you could just pick. That's the beauty of a table. Um, and so their desired offering, and there's four little options here. So for monstrosities, that table is they want you to they need help dislodging the stuck scraps of the creature's last meal, so like there's stuff stuck in their teeth or in their claws or whatever, or the creature's favorite food, or driving off the creature's rival, or making movements that mimic the monster's mating dance. And which I think we all know which is the best and most interesting option on there, but you as the DM could say, yeah, if the player wants to do some research, see if they know something about owl bears, and then you go and you interact with an owl bear, and the DM rolls on this chart or picks the mating option because that's the right one. Um, you could placate this monster and maybe scare it off or help it or something so that you don't actually have to kill the thing. And I think if people use XP, they would still get, full XP because you have defeated that encounter. I think it's actually a really interesting system.
I don't know if there's much of a system here. The only roles that it recommends is the DC 10 plus challenge rating to learn what it might want. And then it just has, hey, here are some things that some things might want. So it's very light in terms of rules, as
Very light.
5e
I love
generally
it.
goes. But I do love this theme. I watched a great video. I can't remember, unfortunately, the name of the guy's YouTube channel. It's the one I've shared with you who does real old D&D stuff, real
Yes.
old tabletop games. And he had one on the dungeon, and he talked about how important the wandering monster was, and how when your players are going through a dungeon, if they linger too long or create a loud sound or something that attracts attention, you roll to see if a wandering monster shows up. And when the wandering monster shows up, you roll to see what its attitude is. It's not assumed that it's immediately hostile. It may be friendly, it may help you out. And so I love opening up this idea of when you encounter something, it's not just a closed box where the players activate the box because they're there and then there's a fight and then the box is over and that's all these encounters are, completely enclosed, not really related to the outside world. So I love anything that really puts a spin on that kind of stagnated idea and opens things up.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting way to do it. I like the fact that it is a really light system. Questing Beast is the YouTube channel. I had to scroll back in our Discord
Questing
chat a little
Beast,
bit.
yes.
Questing Beast is
I
the name of
really
that
like his
YouTuber. I want to
stuff.
give him a shout out here. But yeah, I like the chart. I honestly like the chart because it gives ideas, it's inspiration for a DM to go, ooh, wait a second, I have a fifth option that I want to choose. It doesn't have to
Yes.
be just one of
Mm-hmm.
these, but now I'm in that headspace of thinking, what would it take for this
Yeah.
creature that they're fighting? What would it take for them to not be fighting that creature anymore without having to just kill it? I love combat that doesn't have to end with like all the people on one side or the other side die first or
Yes.
whatever.
Hmm.
Like objective based combat, and this is a way to prevent the combat from happening altogether. You've got this aberration that you have come across. Maybe it can be placated with just the brain or other organs of a rare creature, or flattery, or obsequiousness. That is a word I have not encountered before. Obsequiousness,
Obsequiousness?
obsequiousness,
Obsequiousness? I have no idea.
obsequious. I don't know. Or secrets or lore. It doesn't really know. Or the option four, which is obviously the best option all the time. Accepting a strange organic graft onto your body. Like, listen, man, I will totally leave you alone if you'll let me put this tentacle in your chest. Which, by the way, I definitely have players who would hands down prefer the tentacle to fighting this creature. So, sorry, tentacles down prefer to fighting this
I
creature.
think
So,
of all these options, I get really excited looking at the Fae and the Fiends options.
yeah.
For Fae, giving up the memory of your first kiss, giving up the color of your eyes. Is that just not?
Mm, that's so
Oh
fey.
man. And then for Fiends, number one is just your soul.
Straight and to the point. Listen, man, what's
We
going to
don't have
placate a
to fight.
fiend? Your soul. So, obviously, a
Blood
pretty
from a
high bar
living
there.
or recently slain loved one, and breaking a sacred promise in the Fiend's presence. What a great! I mean, imagine.
Mm,
And this just comes into the idea that players will never surrender. Surrendering is not something that players generally do. But imagine the players getting bested by some demon or devil, and they say, "Look, I guess this would be a devil. I'll let you go, but I want the paladin to break one of his sacred oaths right here, right now, in front of me." What a cool story moment that I don't think would ever work because most likely they'd all jump in and die and then be upset
no, because
after the
any
fact.
paladin worth his salt is going to die before he breaks his oath in front of a devil. But,
And yeah,
yeah. But, I don't know. Maybe a certain kind of paladin would be really tempted to give up their soul to save their friends' lives.
hmm
Yeah, no, there's a lot of really cool options there.
yeah, for sure.
Um, I love it. I love it. Very cool. So next we have environmental hazards, which I believe is a similarly light system, but it just sort of gives some ideas and inspirations. There's two different kinds. There's like natural hazards, and there's supernatural regions here up first, which is really interesting. The kinds of terrain that you can run into as an adventuring party in D&D. Lots of different kinds of magical forces and stuff as you interact with them. And it gives you some ideas about when these effects can occur. Like maybe it's when they first enter the region, but maybe it's if they cast a spell or use a magic item, or if they ever get, knocked unconscious or lose a certain amount of hit points or something like that. So maybe it's not just when they enter the space that this thing is triggered. But there's Blessed Radiance, which is really cool. It's graced by the upper planes, or in my campaign setting, it'd be the Astral Sea. And there's charts. I'm a big fan of charts. Percentile charts.
Yeah,
Those are charts that
and
aren't
they
messing
have.
around.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt, but this one is much less rules light, I would say, because these charts are all put with mechanical effects, lots of
Yeah.
really cool things and die rolls, and definitely this is brilliant. It really makes you feel like you are in a place that ain't normal. Definitely stealing stuff like this. One of the things I've always struggled with, I am planning for my players to enter the Underdark. And correct me if I'm wrong, the Underdark is not the material plane. It is technically a different plane of existence,
I
I
will
believe.
correct you because you are wrong. You are too much
I
of an
am wrong.
advocate of Matt Colville there. That is something from his campaign setting, from his world, that he has
Oh.
changed. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Well, then I'm going to do that anyway.
That's fine.
But
I think it's totally reasonable. But yeah, it is not
I think
actually
it makes
rules
a
as
lot of
written.
sense, and I want the planes to feel different, and
Yeah.
I know that you definitely agree with that. When people go to another plane, um, it shouldn't just be an exotic locale. It should be, look, the rules of nature do not work here in the same ways. And having charts like tables like these is just a great first step into, like, things happen here that aren't normal.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I've made a couple videos about the times my players went to the Feywild and to the Nine Hells, and how fundamentally they were different. The laws of nature, magic, physics, something was fundamentally changed whenever they were on a different plane, and I really like that. There's an example on here of like Blessed Radiance effect, where like each creature carrying the holy symbol of a deity from a non-evil plane while in this region gets advantage on saving throws for the next 24 hours. So if you are religious but not a terrible person, then you have advantage on saves for the next 24 hours. That's really cool.
Hmm.
And then there's the Far Realm, which is very Cthulhu-esque, very weird kind of a place. There's a chart down here. Let's see. A tear in reality creates a rift in the region, similar to the spell Gate, that passes through the far realm and connects with a random plane. That's a very far realm. Any creature that enters the rift takes 10d10 psychic damage from the horrors of the far realm and appears in an empty space closest to the rift's opening on another random plane. That's awesome.
Oh man, imagine a low-level party finding a plane or a portal to the far realm, and they peek through it, and you roll. I mean, you wouldn't roll; you'd just say I rolled, and they take 10d10 damage just for being there. Imagine the fear and awe that that would strike into players as, like, two people peek into the far realm and are instantly knocked unconscious by the horrors within.
Oh yeah.
Very, very, very cool.
Outstanding. Then there's a haunted location. I think this is, again, just by reading these and by reading the charts, you can be inspired to create your own natural hazard. But there's haunted is the next one, and there's different specific conditions for when you might roll on this chart.
Hmm.
In a haunted place, it's whenever you gain, somebody might gain the frightened condition, or if multiple people are unable to see, or if someone's alone, like very horror game type stuff. Very thematic. Something on a chart here. One random creature's shadow acts independently for the next 24 hours. The shadow acts out of sync with its owner, perhaps dramatically choking or trying to murder another shadow. This is like super thematic, spooky
Yeah.
stuff here. I really like this. An infested area like organisms or insects or whatever has taken over an area. There's webs or cocoons or hives or ant hills, insects. This is very, like, this is kind of in the horror vein as well. But yeah, I really like these kinds of things. A cricket-shaped creature with the statistics of a cat bounds up to one random creature and follows it like an affectionate pet for the next 24 hours. A cat-sized cricket is the stuff of nightmares. It can leap so far. Sorry, guys, I'm completely stuck on the cat-sized cricket that can leap over the Empire State Building. Oh gosh.
How about a
Um,
massive bloated maggot emerges from the ground within 10 feet of the party and bursts?
ugh. A younger version of me would have made a your mom joke here, but instead I will move on.
Well, I'm so
Um,
glad that we're mature enough to ignore that.
then we have the mirror zone. That's very interesting. There's psychic resonance is another type of area. Oh, it's very, very trippy stuff. Very evocative. Unraveling magic, magic not functioning normally. Magical phenomenon, like eldritch. Oh no, this is a new type of thing. This is a new type
Yes,
of thing. Magical
new section.
phenomenon happening. I like that. Eldritch storms. Emotional echoes. Oh, these are very cool things. Enchanted springs. And yeah, more charts. Charts, 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 man. All
I
right,
think
this is
of all of these different ideas and different sections that we've gone over in the last couple minutes with the different zones and things like that. My favorite is absolutely the mimic colonies. one of the greatest
Oh
things
man,
I've ever seen. Oh
a
man,
colony of mimics.
they're talking about like they disguise themselves as a village because it's just a bunch of mimics, and they even mention
Wow.
adventurers. I was reading through this; it was just getting so excited. If adventurers pose enough of a threat, since older mimics can communicate telepathically, they might contact the adventurers and say, "Hey, if you don't hurt us, we'll give you something." And they say they might give them information, or they might give them a juvenile mimic. They might give them one of their young, and you can have a mimic pet. And if that isn't the greatest D&D like team mascot to have, imagine having a mimic around your neck instead of a ferret who wants to die. Just fantastic.
This is definitely gonna play a role in my next campaign. A mimic
Perfect.
colony. What? This
Just
is
love it.
outstanding. Yeah, I really like this. I really like this. Hey, here are some ideas, and here's a chart. I think that's the best way to help DMs out. I think they nailed it with Tasha's here. Because charts are great inspiration. Charts are a great way for you to roll and go, that doesn't fit with what I was thinking. And then you see the option just above what you rolled and go, yeah, that's the one. And you pick that one instead. Like, charts are good. Or go for the pure random and just go for whatever you rolled. Primal fruit. Yeah, like really old, forgotten, ancient, magical kind of trees, unearthly roads, and then you have the natural the hazards. So if you're running a little bit lower level or lower magic kind of game, like I am right now, you've got stuff like avalanches, falling into water, falling into another creature. Spell equivalents of these natural hazards. So you've got like a flood, the approximate spell would be like control water or tsunami. So they're giving you like a hey, if you want to run a room where there is a toxic gas in this chamber, they open it up. You could use just the cloud kill spell or the stinking
Yeah.
cloud spell as an example. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I like this. There's just a bunch of different natural hazards with their spell equivalents. Um, I do love that for the natural hazard of earthquake, they suggest the approximate spell would be earthquake. I was hoping there would be
Good of them to
something that
call
was,
that.
yeah, that was aptly named. I saw fog and fog cloud. I was like, so close, and then earthquake and earthquake. Nailed it. And finally, puzzles. There is not much on puzzles in the DMG, so it'll be interesting to see what they expand with here. And I think puzzles is very near the end of the book.
This is the last thing in the book,
Ooh.
and this is akin to, I don't remember. I guess it was Colville. Colville brought up a puzzle book that was basically, it was, I think, from third
The book
edition.
book of challenges.
Yes, this is
Yeah,
that.
man.
This is just a number of completely, totally designed puzzles with handouts and clues and checks that players can make for hints. It is just a list of different puzzles, and I haven't read through very many of them. But given how much I enjoyed the Book of Challenges, I think this is awesome. It's so great to have these ideas. Each one seems to have a whole lot of flavor, and they even talk about, okay, how could you customize this puzzle to lower the difficulty, to raise the difficulty. So I'm a big fan. This is really interesting. I'll have to take some time and really read through each of them, I think.
Yeah, and there are hints that you can give each player based on things that they roll and stuff to maybe help them out, because sometimes puzzles can be pretty rough. I do love right here at the start, it says, hey, why might you even include a puzzle in your adventure in the first place? And outside of obvious reasons, they're like, hey, you could use it to encourage a party to discover information through teamwork, to provide an opportunity for characters to use their skills in uncommon ways. I love that. To make a setting just feel more whimsical, mysterious, or otherworldly, to explain why no one has ever discovered something hidden that's close at hand. It's nearby and known and familiar, but there's that puzzle that nobody's been able to solve. To reveal a secret no one knows and magic can't reveal. feel. So again, really cool inspiration. But yeah, it just seems like a bunch of, hey, here are different puzzles. Here's descriptive text you can just read to the players. Here's the solution. Here are hints that they could get if they use this skill or that skill. There's ways you can customize it. This is pretty cool. Again, I haven't read them like you were saying, but I could see myself just lifting some of these puzzles
Yeah.
straight out of here. They are ready made. Um, and I'm somebody who is very bad at puzzles, both solving and creating. So almost every puzzle I have ever created, I think without exception, I have just straight up stolen from something, from a book I read or a D&D stream I watched or something, Reddit post. I just said, that's a nice puzzle, and I stole it for myself. So I appreciate that they give full examples here as opposed to being like, hey man, puzzles are cool, and that was it. I do like that they give specific examples. Big fan. Um, and then I think, geez, there's a bunch of them. There's like 15
Yeah,
puzzles
there
in
are
here.
there are a lot of them. They've got really nice large sheets for printouts,
Yeah,
handouts.
right here at the end of the
Definitely very
book.
cool.
I'm a big fan. So, so Jimmy, we have gone through the entirety of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. What do you think about the book so far? There's a lot of different parts, but in general, what are your thoughts?
I think overall it is slightly less exciting to me than Xanathar's was. I'm guessing that is because you have the advantage of when I read Xanathar's, basically all I had seen was Player's Handbook. So Xanathar's felt like it was almost doubling the amount of stuff I could do, and this is after those two, not quite as many options compared to what I already had. But this is the kind of stuff I live for. I love having lots of options when I create characters. I love looking through rule books and getting ideas for what kind of archetype I would want to create or put into a campaign for the players to experience. And having books like this definitely give me ideas and excite me around things like that. So I'm a big fan. I like it a lot. I'm just not as completely overjoyed as I was, I think, when I read Xanathar's, but it just has the advantage of or disadvantage of coming out after instead of first.
Yeah. I feel very similarly. I'm definitely reading this book and go, nice. These are all cool things in here. Nothing
Mm-hmm.
is like reawakening and renewed passion for D&D to take it to new heights. Like I don't think it's that book. I don't think it saves the hobby or anything. Not that the hobby needed saving. I think there's some cool stuff in there. I think there's some, obviously outside of my own personal taste. I don't really think there's anything bad in the book. I don't think there's anything dumb in the book that I've seen. Maybe a couple of specific magic items or
On
this
the
one
Artificer.
feat. I mean, the Artificer and Psionics definitely are dumb and bad. But those are my personal tastes. I don't think there's anything in here that breaks the game. I don't think there's, the coffee lock, for example, isn't in here. Um, but yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I'm excited to use and to see used some of these subclasses to figure out what's broken and what's not. Obviously, the internet is going to come to some consensus about certain things, but in my general experience, the internet is often overzealous about certain things, and they decide that something is very, very good or very, very terrible, when in reality, at the table individually, it's not actually that big a deal. But I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I, as a DM, especially all those DM tool stuff, I was reading through it going, nice. None of this changes how I fundamentally think about the game, but a lot of it is good. I'm glad younger or newer players are getting, and DMs are getting these examples of things I had already known about, and I appreciate having a table to reference if I wanted one. I don't know that I always need one, but if I do, I like knowing that it's here for me to go grab. So
Absolutely.
that's sort of where I feel. Also, I like puzzles. I definitely include puzzles in my games, so
I
being able
hate
to just
puzzles.
lift it, I know we've talked about that. That's another video.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't want to bring it up when we were going through them.
thematically, thematically can be very jarring, but if they're done right, I can be a fan
uh,
sparingly. Um,
Grammatically. practically and
Maybe
just
we'll debate
everything.
about that another time. But I appreciate you giving me like 97 hours or however long these, I'm going to break them up into these two videos, have been. Thanks for hanging out.
Heck
I
yeah, it
appreciate going through this
was a
book with me.
blast.
Definitely. Maybe we sit down and do some of these debates in the future because I think we definitely approach the game in different ways. And I know I'm always challenged and encouraged whenever we get to have these conversations.
Oh yeah, no, definitely grow a lot. Just talk about D&D with you for sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone who's been listening in. Congratulations if you made it to the end of both of these videos. I'm sure all two and a half of you are wonderful people. I don't know why you would listen to us talk for that long, but thank you, and I'll see you next time.